grows by $20.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome everyone to our event, Accelerate Digital Economy for Inclusive Integration in Asia Pacific. I'm Jeff Tremblay from Huawei's Corporate Communication. With us today, we have eminent academics, business people, diplomats, reporters, as well as members of the public. Once again, thank you for being with us today. To kick off our program, I will now introduce Jay Chen, Vice President of Huawei Asia Pacific. He will explain why today's topic is so important and relevant to Asia. Jay, please.
Yes. So, good afternoon, everyone. The first, Your Excellency, Johari Orimangan, Ambassador of Indonesia to China, and Dr. Lee Kwang-Nen, Head of the ICT and the Tourism Division, ASEAN Secretary, and Dr. Vo Chui Tang, Director of the Institute for Brand Strategy and Computation, and Dr. Tang Ki Yap, Chairman of Singapore National Committee for Pacific Economic Cooperation, and Dr. Arvin An, Professor of Economics, Ateneo de Manila University, Professor Jose Taglongan, COO and the Managing Director of Corporate Foresight and Beacon Consulting, and the friends and the colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and good morning as well. I'm Jay Chen from Huawei Asia Pacific. It's a great honor for me to welcome you to today's conversation on Accelerate Digital Economy for Inclusive Integration in Asia Pacific. The pandemic has brought disruption of our life and brings new normal, increasingly relied on digital connection. Just like our virtual conversation connecting us today, the exploration for digital prosperity and the determination on winning the battle against the COVID-19 never rest on this hardship. I heard recently in some neighbor countries in our ASEAN region, the pandemic are getting more and more serious. According to the Huawei 2020 Global Connectivity Index, countries with a higher connectivity scores expect decline 50% lower in GDP than in countries with lower connectivity scores. Digital economy is not only becoming a resilient counter-response to social disruption, but also a long-term engine for regional glory and inclusion in ASEAN. It brings encouraging opportunities and collaboration beyond the borders in a time of uncertainty. ASEAN is one of the most promising regions to grow into the digital economy bloc. It is predicted to become the top 5 economics and the digital hub worldwide in the coming future. We can see flourishing ICT roadmap to speed up digital economy through enhancing ICT infrastructure, removing trade barriers, and fulfilling digital talent gaps. Indonesia, Thailand, and Malaysia have put forward Industry 4.0 to digitalize manufacturing and industries. Also, Vietnam aims at 30% of its GDP will be generated by digital economy by 2025. And Singapore, Philippines eyed on small and medium-sized enterprise to virtualize digital economy. Having served this region for over 20 years, we from Huawei, as a world-leading ICT supplier and a local contributor, is committed to enabling ASEAN's Digital Master Plan 2025 and propelling integrated Asia-Pacific in the age of digitalization. I would like to take today's opportunity to share some of our plans with you. First, being the bones of economic flows, ICT connectivity will be strengthened to support rapidly growing virtual connection. As coverage of broadband services ranks number 4 of barrier to achieve ASEAN's digital master plan, Huawei will continue to update the network quality and improve the digital coverage, especially in the rural areas, partnership with our customer operators. Together with operators, Huawei initiated Rural Star program to increase internet coverage in remote area. The innovation lowers cost by replacing traditional towers with simple poles, shifting from diesel to solar power. By the end of the 2020, the Rural Star program had benefits over 60 countries, including Thailand, Indonesia, and many other countries globally. Besides, modern R&D investment will be optimized to leverage 5G, AR, and IoT technologies to improve industrial productivity, benefiting from healthcare, education, and urbanization. We believe this will enable market players to share the benefits of digital age. Second, we keep empowering talents with cutting-edge ICT knowledge and industrial insight. If infrastructures are bones, talents are blood for sustaining digital economy. The lack of digital literacy among end users is the top barrier according to the ASEAN's Digital Master Plan and obstacle for digital inclusion. Taking initiatives on collaboration with governments, academics, and international organizations, Huawei shares ICT knowledge and has trained over 100,000 talents in Asia Pacific to meet the talents deficit proactivity. In the next 5 years, we will help to train 400,000 more digital talents in this region, preparing for the accelerating digital industries. Last but not least, we work for inclusive ecosystem, including digital economy in long term. Huawei supports open, fair, and standardized trade access that unleashes industrial opportunities and innovative energies. SMEs are ignite of digital economy. The landscape of startups in Asia Pacific need to scale up to exercise and produce digital innovations. Huawei Spark program is launched last year and continues to provide upgraded ICT advisory and end-to-end support to upbringing startup covering Asia Pacific countries with a wide range of industrial focus. We also emphasize on applying green technology. In Asia Pacific, Huawei has increasing investment in sustainable green solutions, leveraging clean power generation, electric transportation, and smart energy storage. For example, Huawei has helped to build the world's largest offshore floating photovoltaic farms in Singapore, offsetting over 4,000 tons of the carbon dioxide by converting the sunlight into electrical energy. Sustainability leads to the longer prosperity. Digital economy can be leveraged to combat climate change. Today, we feel grateful to have invited thought leadership in digital economy to bring sparks on the table. Let's work together to cultivate an integrated, competitive, and sustainable region. It takes time to effort, but if we move a step forward today, it will be there tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe today's discussion can help us explore these topics better. Thank you very much, and I hope today's discussion successful. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Jay, for this vision of a sustainable digital future. Next, we have the keynote address. After the keynote address, we will move directly to the panel discussion. The panel discussion will be moderated by my colleague, Andrew Williamson, Economic Advisor for Government Affairs at Huawei. I now have the honor and pleasure to introduce His Excellency Johari Oratmangun, Indonesian Ambassador to China. His Excellency will deliver the keynote address for the event today. Ambassador, please.
Thank you very much. Dear friends, Your Excellency, Mr. Jay Chen, Vice President of Huawei Asia Pacific, Dr. Lee Kwang Lan, Assistant Director, Head of the ICT and Tourism Division, ASEAN Secretariat, Dr. Pho Trinh Ha, Director of the Institute for Brand Strategy and Competition, Dr. Tan Ki Giap, Chairman of the Singapore National Committee for Pacific Economic Cooperation, Dr. Alvin T. Ang, Professor of Economics, Ateneo de Manila University, Professor Jose de Colongan, COO and Managing Director of the Corporate Foresight Ambigant Consulting, and of course, our dear moderator today, Mr. Andrew Williamson, Vice President and Economic Advisor of Government Affairs. Distinguished speaker, participants, ladies and gentlemen, a very good afternoon from Huawei in Beijing. First of all, it is indeed a great honor and bliss for me to have been invited to Huawei Coffee Conversation with the theme Accelerate Digital Economy for Inclusive Integration in Asia Pacific, Connecting Digital Industry in Pandemic, to share with you about fast-growing digital economy in Indonesia. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, the global pandemic has significantly accelerated the pace of adoption of digital transformation technologies, as well as others speeding up other business changes. And everything today is to be transformed into virtual and digital. digitalization is actually shaping our world, our daily lifestyle, and even our economy, as well as we usually call as digital economy, which defines the economic activity that results from billions of everyday online connections among people, businesses, devices, data, and processes. The digital economy is taking shape and undermining conventional notions about how businesses are structured, how firms interact, how consumers obtain services, information, and goods, and even how payment is settled virtually. The digital transformation has been significantly accelerated during the pandemic, in which everyone's economic and social engagement dramatically transformed into a virtual and digital. And e-commerce logistics has turned into a business opportunity for both startups and established players, whereas digital payments are rapidly spreading online and offline in all regions globally, and in particular in our region. In this special occasion, I also would like to share a bit that Indonesia is also in its endeavor to advance its digital development. On March this year, my President Joko Widodo, formed a task force for the acceleration and expansion of regional digitization to accelerate digital transformation as an effort to expand the digital economy and finance to accelerate the transformation and recovery of the national economy. The transformation will not only be applied in Indonesians' business life, but also in governmental bodies as a part of our endeavor to promote good governance. And I would probably like to also brief you a little bit about Indonesia. As we already know that Indonesia has a promisingly vibrant potential in digital economy as well. Let me show you some figures. Indonesia's e-commerce transaction in the year 2020, increasing by 44% on a year basis, reached $44 billion. Indonesian Trade Minister predicted that Indonesia's digital economy would grow 8 times fold in 2030. Currently, Indonesia has 6 unicorns, and one of them has become decacorn. Internet penetration in Indonesia already reached 74% and reached 198 million internet users. And since April this year, 2 giants of digital platform companies in Indonesia have merged, and I think it's already ranked 12th biggest world unicorns today. With this potential, Indonesia has established a number of cooperations in digital sector with other countries, of course China, which is one of the world's biggest digital players. In the endeavor, Indonesia has engaged with a number of outstanding companies in China. To name a few of them, of course, Huawei, ByteDance, Alibaba, Meituan, Tojoy, Jumore, JD, Tencent, etc. Now let me allude a little bit about Huawei in Indonesia. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, I have learned that Huawei has been operational in Indonesia since year 2000 and now hiring more than 2,500 workers, in which almost 90% of them are Indonesians. And during that time, the company has contributed in assisting more than 500 new SMEs, which run in 15 different sectors and absorbed more than 20,000 employees. I also learned that earlier this year, Huawei established Huawei ASEAN Academy Engineering Institute, which has engaged 33 outstanding universities in Indonesia. The program, of course, has benefited 12,000 engineers and 7,000 students in Indonesia. In addition, Huawei's investment in research and development in Indonesia has reached billions US dollar in 2020. With this number, Huawei's invested in Indonesia since 2009 has increased substantially. And of course, I would like to see that Huawei continue to invest in Indonesia. Looking into this achievement, I am glad to encourage Huawei to enhance its cooperation with all stakeholders in Indonesia, especially to encourage SMEs' digital transformation, strengthen telecommunication infrastructure, 5G technology, artificial intelligence, and so on. As I do believe that Indonesia, like other countries, is in search of digital enhancement. Congratulations as well for the new office of Huawei in Indonesia. Last but not least, I would love to witness how Huawei grows and adds value in our regional digital development in the face of the fast-growing digitalization that has gotten the world connected economically, financially, and socially. And of course, our region is leading in this particular issue as well. I wish today's meeting a great success. Terima kasih, xie, thank you, and greetings from Beijing. My name is Jauhari Oratmangun, and my Chinese name is Chow Haoli.
Well, thank you very much, Your Excellency, for that great speech. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Andrew Williamson, and I am the Vice President of Government Affairs and the Economic Advisor at Huawei. I'm really honored to be moderating this panel discussion on the topic of accelerating digital economy for inclusive integration in the Asia-Pacific region. And we're really fortunate this afternoon to have some real expert panelists with us to spark discussion and provide some insights onto this topic. We appear to be at a hinge point in history. Digital technologies and the digital economy have been running ahead of growth in the traditional economy for some time now, at least the last 2 decades. And then the pandemic hit. Digital adoption and the crucial nature of ICT infrastructure became hugely apparent in the last 18 months or so. An acceleration of digital transformation has been taking place, it seems, in almost all countries. But in this rush to the future, we run the risk of excluding important stakeholders in society. Challenges to digital transformation also remain country-specific and unique given different levels of development to date. Deeper integration as well across the ASEAN region will also be very important in terms of fostering and burgeoning future unicorns and gaining the benefits of digital transformation. Now, I'll be asking each of our panelists to make a short opening statement. Our first panelist today is Dr. Le Quan Lan, Assistant Director and Head of the ICT and Tourism Division at the ASEAN Secretariat. Over to you, Dr. Le.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me to share my perspective in this forum. So as most of us are aware that the digital technologies is becoming the driving force for the development of business, and it helped to transform how the people interact and how the good and service are being traded and produced. So there's no doubt that the digital transformation is also define how ASEAN country integrate and how the ASEAN look like in the next 5 or few years. So look at the digital performance of and digital economy of ASEAN so far. It's pretty very much impressive. So in 2019, for the first time, the revenue of the ASEAN digital economy had hit 100 billion US dollar, and that revenues has actually be expected to reach about 300 billion by 2025. So as a result, we all expect that the size of the digital economy of ASEAN would reach 8.5% in terms of GDP in 2025, and it's up from 1.3% in 2015. So that would be a very significant move. So with the dynamic economic growth rate of 4.8% annually, actually that ASEAN growth rate outpaced the global growth rate, which is about 2.9%. And so we, ASEAN, have already geared toward a more proactive digital transformation over the last few years. So since 2000 and especially with the COVID-19, the pandemic has exacerbated the trend of digital transformation in ASEAN. And for the year 2021 alone, ASEAN have already come up with a very significant policy. The first one is the ASEAN Digital Master Plan 2025, and that plan has attempt to define ASEAN as a leading digital community and economic bloc powered by secure and transformative digital service, technology, and ecosystem. The second very important document that ASEAN is now being pursued, ASEAN is pursuing is the ASEAN Digital Integration Framework Action Plan. And that framework is trying to advance the ASEAN digital integration process across the sector body. And the last but not least, but very important document that ASEAN has now developing is the work plan on the implementation of the ASEAN agreement on e-commerce. We hope that with the entry into force of the e-commerce agreement in ASEAN, we can rely on the e-commerce as the new engine for the growth. So having said that, digital transformations will not go without a lot of challenge. Cybersecurity, I agree that a lot of things that we need to address, digital device, personal data protection, the digital trade, protectionism could be a potential impediment to the regional digital integration in ASEAN. So for that, I thank the host for organizing this very important event, and thank Huawei for your initiative. I hope that the private sector participation would also contribute to shape up a sound, a fair, and open digital policy within the region. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Le. Now, our second panelist is Dr. Vo Tri Tan, Director of the Institute for Brand Strategy and Competition in Vietnam. Please make your opening statement.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. I try to be very brief. When we talk about Asia Pacific, we mean there's a very dynamic region. We mean there's integration, cooperation. And over the last more than 30 years, with the integration and cooperation, we achieved a lot of, we have a significant achievement in terms of promoting economic growth, in terms of reducing absolute poverty, and many other things. but that's not good enough. Now we talk about sustainable and inclusive development. In other words, we would like to have a people-centered development. We would like to have inclusive integration. So I believe even there are a lot of challenges. Digital transformation can have a lot significant contribution to the inclusive development, to the inclusive integration. Not surprisingly, over the last few years, the leaders of the APEC, the leaders of ASEAN, always emphasize on the people-centered development, emphasize on inclusive development and inclusive integration. So that's why I think the topic today we have a conversation on very in the right time, and that's have significant for ourselves and for the whole region. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vo. Now, our third panelist this afternoon is Dr. Tan Ki Yap, Chairman of the Singapore National Committee for Pacific Economic Cooperation. Over to you, Dr. Tan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we all know the fruit of globalization was not equally shared between the multinational corporations and SMEs. And now we have a digitalization can potentially worsen the divide between companies of different sizes. And also I think the pandemic have made the capacity to transform our economy into digitalization more difficult. And while the need of transformation for digitalization have increased, but the capacity and the resources to achieve this transformation, I think, is very challenging. Therefore, I would like to say that the title of this talk is Inclusive Integration. I think this is very important. And I believe government ought to play a significant role by ensuring digital capability as a public good. And Singapore would like to provide such support in ASEAN in particular. And I think companies like Huawei, ICT company, have the technology to ensure not just digitalization, but the quality of digitalization, not just in the urban area, but also in agriculture sector. I think this is very important to ensure the integration is inclusive. And I also like to say that it is important that we recognize that China has successfully modernized the agriculture sector through digitalization, not only allowing the farmers to reach the buyers bypassing the middlemen, but allowing farmers to gather information on what to plant, where the market is, and what kind of crop will give you higher yield. I think this successful model of China have upgraded the agriculture sector through digitalization. Therefore, I believe that such model can also be transformed into ASEAN in particular, as most member economies of ASEAN are still developing economies. And urbanization may not be a good thing if public services are not available. So massive and quick urbanization may not be something that we welcome, but upgrading the agriculture sector to make it more inclusive for many developing economies, I think, are paramount. Therefore, I urge not only government, private sector company like Huawei have an important role, and I think we should be able to work together to ensure that the digitalization would not cause further income disparity among those urbanized and the rural areas within the ASEAN economies. Thank you. I'll stop here.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tan. Now, our fourth panelist this afternoon is Professor Alvin Ang, Professor of Economics at Ateneo Manila University. Please make your opening statement, Professor Ang.
Thank you very much for this opportunity to share my thoughts and my understanding of how digitalization is affecting ASEAN and all of us, also not only ASEAN but the world. As already mentioned by our colleagues who made their statements, I have the same challenge in my mind. The most important thing that ASEAN and the rest of Asia Pacific should prepare for is the skills challenge that is coming out of this pandemic, and at the same time facilitated by this digitalization. And essentially what that means is that it looks like it's a technology problem, but many of the poor and developing countries in Asia Pacific is not just it's not only technologically challenged, but they're also challenged in their economic and social activities. And so it's not only technology that we are focusing on, should be, and we should also be looking at other things apart from it. So it's like putting in a much better mechanism of delivering programs and projects that will provide the basic foundations for skills protection, and also to protect the lower income as we move forward in digitalization. Definitely there would be winners and losers, but we have to prepare to compensate the losers and prepare them that they will not be losing so much and they can adopt. Our topic is about inclusivity of digitalization. That is, I think, the critical aspect of international cooperation in the region. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Ang. Now, our final panelist this afternoon is Professor Jose Decalongan, who is the CEO and Marketing Director of Corporate Foresight at Embiggen Consulting. Over to you, Jose.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's an honor to be able to speak and share my insights along with our esteemed panel with us this afternoon. So I'd like to start off by saying that 99% of enterprises in the Philippines are micro, small, medium enterprises. And they definitely play a substantial role in the growth of our economy in terms of more jobs, creation of new products and services, and improving competition within the industry. There are obvious opportunities offered by this wave of digitalization, digital transformation. And we've barely skimmed the potential in terms of e-commerce, for example, here in the Philippines. The current contribution of e-commerce, based on a recent study by our Department of Trade and Industry, is approximately $12 billion. In Philippine pesos, that's around 600 billion. It's substantial. It's around 3.4% of our GDP. It employs around 500,000 people. But there's still a lot more that we could do. I mean, if we could just compare with the figures that were presented earlier, if we're talking about the whole of ASEAN, if we follow the targets set by the e-commerce roadmap by our Department of Trade and Industry, this can double to $24 billion or 1.2 trillion by year 2022 alone. So that's basically next year. So in the Philippines, we've experienced also the rise of regional startups based here that have been incubated in Y Combinator, the most prestigious incubator in the world based in Silicon Valley. We've also experienced the rise of venture funding from global venture capitalists. Widespread university-based startup incubators have also popped up in recent years. We also have an almost unicorn, which is GCash. It's the Philippines mobile wallet, which facilitates mobile payments and branchless banking services. The Philippine startup ecosystem is becoming robust and a real regional player in the fintech and e-commerce verticals. However, there are definite challenges, as mentioned earlier by my fellow panelists, and these challenges are faced by these micro, small, medium enterprises, but also the large organizations. Challenges related to coverage and speed of current digital and infrastructure. This is where telecom players such as Huawei and our local players play a very important role. But there are also challenges related to how we do business, the ease of doing businesses, the barriers to access and adoption of digitalization in terms of digital talent and know-how, as mentioned already by my fellow countrymen, amongst others. And I'm excited to go into our discussion to be able to build and really talk about how we can accelerate the digital economy in our region. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor. So let's go to our first question. This issue about acceleration. There's been a number of research papers from the likes of McKinsey, Boston Consultancy Group, and the World Economic Forum. It's a particular hot topic that talks about this pervasive digital acceleration caused by the pandemic and a race to digital adoption. What are your thoughts on this? We'd be really interested to hear your personal experiences from your markets, from your countries, as to whether or not this is true, and perhaps provide some examples. And with that, perhaps we can go back to Professor Jose to start and talk about what you've experienced in the corporate sector, the business community, to this effect.
Yeah, I mean, I would say this is like I was in a panel also last week with a lot of the big manufacturers here and a bit of the service industry too, and we were talking about how this whole experience of it was like 10 years of change compressed into 1 year. And they're really in a way this what we call like a forced experiment. A lot of our organizations, a lot of our clients have no choice to actually hasten their digital transformation. Even the traditional brick and mortar companies, they had no choice to actually go and digitize. Even micro, small, and medium enterprises. Unfortunately, there are quite a number, particularly in the service sectors, that require physical or in-person activity as part of their their business model, which were not able to survive. But there were some who were really able to pivot, and that actually this kind of change is something that I think will stick. Obviously, organizations are really looking at what's portable, meaning the work that can be done anywhere. But then there's also obviously those aspects which are not, which will still have to be done physically or in person. So going back to your question, I think there really is a move towards digital transformation. I also teach I teach in the top business school here in the Philippines, and we switched actually in terms of my classes. I had 2 weeks to switch my delivery from digital to in-person, from in-person to digital. And now I've started to teach hybrid classes as well. So, but let's say organizations, some of our clients, even our school has actually identified that this is a good thing in terms of being able to offer our services outside of the country, for example, making that easier. And what was considered difficult in terms of, let's say, holding classes or being able to deliver services digitally is now actually there is an adoption, and we've proven that it can be done. So, and there are a lot of benefits in terms of costs and access that are related to that. So I think that will be sustained. And it's just a matter of overcoming the current obstacles that we have.
Thank you. Dr. Vo, what's been your experience in Vietnam?
Basically the same we can observe in my country, in Vietnam and Vietnam economy. A few examples. Over the last 2 years, e-commerce in Vietnam and mobile payment increased at 30 and 50%. So very high growth. And even during the pandemic, according to the survey by the CSO, Central Statistics Office in Vietnam, the survey covered more than 150,000 companies in Vietnam, so more than 30%. 1/3 of the company, they have some kind of investment in the digital technology to improve the management of the company or improve the way of interaction between the company with the market, with the customers. So basically a significant change during the pandemic. I don't know exactly. Maybe the pace of acceleration of digital transformation of the firms in the post-pandemic COVID-19 may be lower, what we observe now. But I do believe that digital transformation continue to be a kind of trend at the not just economy scale, but regional scale and global scale.
Thank you. Perhaps I could invite Dr. Tan now to talk about his observations and thoughts from Singapore.
Tan,
I think you're on mute.
Macro.
Okay, can you hear me? Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. I think many of the projection of digitalization were over optimistic because they were made before the pandemic COVID-19, and many underestimated how the continuous waves of pandemic attack will come in. Therefore, I think that many economies, they are deeply hurt by the pandemic, and their ability to transform into digitalization is very challenging. And that also, as attention are being paid to urbanization, to digitalize, and that make the rural economy further left behind. Now, even in Singapore, we are very well endowed with resources by the government agency for digital transformation. But we found SMEs are really either too busy with their day-to-day survival, or some SMEs are becoming not even sustainable, let alone to execute the digital transformation. So government with the resources, they are coming in to help small companies, SMEs to transform by giving them subsidies, by offering this as a public goods. So I'm afraid that the rapid digitalization may be too optimistic, and therefore, within ASEAN, I think economies like Singapore, an initiative from ASEAN ought to come forward more aggressively to address not just digitalization in the urban area, but also in the agricultural sector. And so therefore, I think our joint action together, and we must seriously study the model in China. I think Singapore is not an agricultural country, but we think agriculture sector is so important in modernizing it. And therefore, I would like to see more effort within ASEAN to help to push those developing economies and help them to transform. And the empowerment of this digitalization to the public at large is more important. It's not the technology progress itself. So empowerment to the people and the people connectivity through digitalization, I think is the crucial issue here. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. So look, this is a very important point, I think, that you've raised, and it feeds into our second question. I think broadly then we were in agreement that there has been this acceleration, but of course there's been lots of pain points. There've always been these ongoing pain points about the digital journey, the road to digital transformation. So thinking through your experiences and observations, what are those obstacles, the big obstacles that remain within your countries to encouraging take up of digital tools and solutions across different economic sectors and different size businesses? Perhaps we can go to Professor Ang first of all to talk through these issues.
Thank you very much, Andrew. I think, I mean, at least in my country, the challenge basically is the infrastructure is one. The technological infrastructure is one thing at the moment. But beyond that, and deeper than that, just like what Dr. Tan has said, I think we need to really look at the abilities and capabilities of our people, particularly the general public who will be using the technology. It is upon us, but then a large segment of the population, I believe in my country, we don't have that access to the internet compared to our neighbors in ASEAN here in the Philippines. It only recently we're picking up, but still a significant portion of the population may have access, may have the gadget to be able to access the internet. But then there is some fundamentals learnings that they have to be able to maximize the efficient use of technology. For instance, this is not just skills of using the technology, but also how to make the technology useful for them in their lives on a daily basis. Just like what Dr. Tan said, what is happening in China, they were able to use it for agricultural forecasting. So these are things that I think at the moment is the gap. We have plans. I think all of the ASEAN member countries have made their master plans, their roadmaps for digital adaptation. But the challenge is how is it really on the ground? And it can only be seen by the way technology is being used. And just like Singapore has a much advanced infrastructure, but they also have the challenge of the ordinary people using it for their day-to-day activity. So the gap to me has to do with the skills, with the skills fine-tuning. How do you make use of this information? How do you make use of this technology to be able to improve your lives at the moment? You know, the pandemic has pushed everyone to learn, but I think they only learn it just to survive the day. We have to adaptation is another thing than just surviving. And I think in this post-COVID environment, this will all the more accelerate, and that's why the gap must be addressed. I think we are at the stage that we are stopping plans. We are now implementing what we have planned. That should be the way to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, I mean there is a wide body of research that suggests that adoption leads innovation. So really trying to close these remaining digital divides are really important. I wonder if Dr. Vo could give us some insights and perspectives from Vietnam about this issue of closing the digital divide.
In broader sense, Vietnam now we are at the turning point for development. We would like to have a kind of development rely more on the higher productivity and innovation. So that's why we see the fourth industrial revolution and digital transformation as the golden opportunity for Vietnam to catch up with other ASEAN countries, with other more advanced countries. So we have already a strategy for promoting the fourth industrial revolution, like many other ASEAN countries. We also already adopted last year a national program for the digital transformation. We have three pillars: digital government, digital society, and digital economy, right? So we already have everything there: gas, programs, action plans. So I think the key challenges is implementation, right? How we can have a good implementation. So bottom up and also the top down, we have two problems. Even we already have a political win, political determination, right? Other challenges, of course, there's a distance gap, right? A skin gap, urban, rural gap, like many other already mentioned. Big companies, SME gaps. So we need a kind of reform of education training system. We need to have more appropriate skill acquiring program. So people can use ICT technology, digital technology, more more effective way, right? Another challenge also there's about policy and regulation. The digital economy, many things we don't know yet. Not say about 100% we know about that, right? Competition, accounting, taxation, appropriate free flow of data. So how you can have a good regulation dealing with the new business model. No say about the sandbox or the startup and other challenges already mentioned, infrastructure. There's not just about the broadband, right, 5G or whatever we try to develop. There's about the data, right? How we can have on the citizen ID, digital ID. Now Vietnam try to develop this year, so we can have very uh, basic data important for the digital economy, important for digital transformation. Security, privacy on that also aspect. Maybe we try to learn the best practice from other, and we need a kind of collaboration, a recent one on this issue. So many challenges, right? Even there, opportunities. That's basically about the case of my country, Vietnam.
Thank you very much. Now, I want to bring in Dr. Le from the ASEAN Secretariat, because moving ahead, if you really want to develop your digital economy, we heard from the ambassador from Indonesia, the relative success that they've had at producing unicorns. But if you want to move to innovation, to become a leading proponent of the global digital economy, it seems that scale has been really important, these platform economies, the scale of your and size of your domestic economy. So obvious examples include the United States and China there. Dr. Le, what do you think needs to happen within the region to facilitate deeper integration so that the region, Southeast Asia, can become a real powerhouse in the global digital economy?
Thank you. Thank you very much for the question. I think it's I think you already mentioned precisely the nature of the nature of or the dynamic motivation of digital business, which is very much rely on the scale of economy. So you also mentioned correctly that that is why many unicorn has succeeded in either in China or in the United States. And I think ASEAN also share the same visions. We really want to transform the ASEAN economy as a single digital economy where our business and our unicorn can maximize the benefit of the integrated ASEAN digital economy. So that is the basic vision that ASEAN is now trying to build. But in order to do that, and we also see a lot of potential to do that, we have a very large scale of internet users, with about 360 million internet users in ASEAN, and most of them have more than one or two mobile or computer or laptop. So actually, that we have in the nature, we do really have a fundamental element for the scalable digital economy. But how to get there is really a big journey for ASEAN. So number one, we believe that ASEAN should build up a common legislations background so that every businesses in ASEAN can operationalize smoothly across the border. That can be about the trade or investments policy that ASEAN should come together. The second, that we also believe that the data governance regime of ASEAN should be harmonized. To some extent, it should be enable the business to transfer the data smoothly and easily across the border within, at least within the ASEAN country, or even go beyond that. And we also think about that digital transformation is not just about the opportunity, but eventually that ASEAN should work together to address the emerging challenging issue. I think many of the issue that some of our panelists has mentioned is about the digital, the skill gap, or the SME who are not able to make use of the digital transformation. But I also think that a lot of cost-cutting challenging or emerging challenging of ASEAN, like cybersecurity, need to be properly addressed. And also about the accessibility of the people in ASEAN to the internet world or to the cyberspace must be secure. And ASEAN is trying to inspire its member state to apply a common rule and regulation to make sure that everyone in ASEAN should have freedom and should have the right to access properly in the cyberspace. So I think that is how ASEAN want to realize the goal based on the scalable digital economy that ASEAN is aiming for. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, I think we could carry on talking all day. Actually, there were other questions that we wanted to cover, but I do want to keep to the timetable. So I really want to thank you all for those thoughts and insights. I think, you know, really there are enormous potential and prospects for the ASEAN region to become global leaders in the digital economy. But again, thank you all very much. And without further ado, we are now going to hand over to questions and answers from the media. So I'll hand over to my colleague, Jeff, now.
Yes, thank you everyone for this very interesting panel. Our audience has been silent so far. We will now give them an opportunity to talk and ask questions. So members of the media, I think you've done this quite often in the past year, but I'll just remind you, there's a raise hand button, probably on the right hand at the bottom of your screen. If you want to ask a question, raise your hand, and then I will say your name. If I cannot see the name of your media, please also say the name of your media. If I cannot see your name, only the name of your media, say your name, please, and then ask your questions. You will have to unmute yourself before asking your question. Let's see. Yes, I have a question from RJ Balinpin from, please name your media and unmute yourself first. Yes, go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm RJ from Business World in Manila. So this is my question. What can be done to ensure that the rural population in every country in the Asia Pacific or ASEAN is able to take advantage of new technologies? Or let's say, what kind of policy or innovation is needed aside from making the internet and ICTs accessible to more people to bridge the digital divide between rural and urban areas?
Yeah, very interesting question. Excellent question. I would volunteer Dr. Ang if you're ready to do that.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. Thank you for that question, RJ. Yeah, that's actually, I think, the core of making inclusive digital integration in the region. And as I was mentioning earlier, that's the biggest challenge of the digitalization process, because it's so fast and it's really going to leave a lot of the those rural areas behind. Uh, Suffice it to say that there is no substitute for making basic telecom or technology infrastructure a public good, at least in the setting up the process and everything. The second is that, as I said, it's not just technology. You have to also look at the economy and look at also at the social networks of people in the rural areas, and that is where education is very powerful. And so, the education system, whether it is delivered online, hybrid, or face to face, must put in context the foundational elements of digitalization, whether it's in the basic education level, or in for those who are in the middle ages, or those who are working already, trying to learn and upgrade themselves. So these are some public goods that needs to be done, whether we like it or not. It is there, and we have to invest in them, and give our rural areas an opportunity to catch up by at least providing them with the basic skills to get through the international through the technology highway. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We have a few more questions. Okay. I think we'll move to Vietnam. We'll come back to the Philippines later. Sorry, I never studied Vietnamese. Big Tui, please.
Good afternoon. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to join this conversation. I have one question. As you know, Vietnam is accelerating digital transformation to develop a digital economy and integrate further into the Asia Innovation Network. The guests also mentioned about the advantages and opportunity for Vietnam. So in your opinion, how can Vietnam deal with the challenges to go ahead? And what lesson should Vietnam learn from other regional countries? Thank you.
Maybe that should go to Dr. Vo.
Thank you for the question. Something I already mentioned during panelist discussion. Vietnam now understand that the only way we can capture with the fourth revolution, industrial revolution, and the digital transformation, with that we can catch up with other country and more advanced country. And we have aspiration, we have political will, we have political determination. That's our advantage now, right? Another advantage, many people talk about human resources in Vietnam. Even we have a lot of weaknesses, but many Vietnamese very good in mathematics, so they can very good in adapting to the digital technology, right? Sometimes we say Vietnamese very hard to get the medal in the Olympics, say in Tokyo now, but Vietnamese people get a lot of medal in the mathematics Olympic and other science Olympics, right? So that's kind of advantage. But another advantage, Vietnam economy very open. We now join the 17 FTAs, including high quality FTAs like TPP, CPTPP, or EVFTAs. And in TPP or CPTPP, for example, we have a chapter on e-commerce, on the data transaction, and other kind of cooperation on e-commerce, implementation of the ASEAN master plan, right, on the digital economy development. So all of this, if we implement, right, effectively, that's also the way we can promote digital transformation somehow. But we understand, right, have a commitment to the any kind of FTAs. That's not enough. We need a kind of structural reform for the on kind of institution related to digital economy, digital transformation, regulation, policy, sandbox, together with the development of infrastructure, try to improve the human resources, and many other things already on the challenges I mentioned. And all of this, we already emphasize in our strategy, in our national program on the digital transformation. So at the end, I would like to say, with the openness, we can learn a lot, best practice from our partners. We can share our experience with other partners in the region. But the key thing now for Vietnam, I already mentioned during the panelist discussion, that's action, right? Because in the new context of digital transformation, speed much more important than the size. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next one will be from Risa. Please unmute yourself, introduce yourself, and Raymond, you'll be right after. Risa, please.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for inviting me, and I hope you can hear me. So I'm living here in Cambodia right now, and the country is in a very unique position in that we have more internet users than the actual total population of our country. And I'm wondering if we can discuss how the country can leverage this strength and take concrete measures to strengthen and benefit the economy, so that digital transformation encompasses more than just e-wallets or e-commerce, but also things like tourism and agriculture, as discussed earlier. And what role will the Internet of Things have in this transformation? Thank you. I'm going to take myself off of mute and enjoy your responses. Thank you.
Oh, Cambodia, that should probably, Mr. Tan, Dr. Tan, would your knowledge of Cambodia be enough?
Who are you talking to?
Oh, Dr. Tan in Singapore.
Ah,
Tan Kigap.
okay. Talking to me?
Yes.
Okay, I hope you can hear me. Now, I think I want to be very frank. I think the biggest problem about digitalization lies in the respective government of ASEAN. The weaknesses, the biggest weakness, I think, come from the government. And I tell you this, until 2019, before the pandemic, I traveled to so many cities, so many places in ASEAN. I'm very disappointed by the internet coverage. The infrastructure of digital coverage is so poor. Either there's no signal or the speed is so slow, it's so frustrating. So until the infrastructure by the government are being facilitated more than just a capital. While it is good to talk about regulations, about privacy, about security, but I think the more fundamental level is respective ASEAN government got to make sure the coverage of the internet at other places of the country, including smaller cities, never mind the rural areas, that has to be done first. Now, we don't worry so much about human resources, whether they know how to use or not. I think the people in the countryside, they're very clever. You look at China, once you provide the infrastructure, they will teach one another and they get onto it. Now, until we get this infrastructure out, I'm afraid to say that the duty, the responsibility is with the respective government. Otherwise, the digital divide will worsen, not because of the technology, but the inability of the respective government to make sure that the coverage are wide enough, are more encompassing to achieve inclusive integration. I know this, many governments may feel unhappy to hear this, but I say this is my personal experience. It's very frustrating that internet infrastructure are not pervasive in many ASEAN countries in smaller cities. I hope the ASEAN secretary can do more about this. But obviously you need infrastructure, you need resources. So Huawei have the advantage of speed in terms of internet accessibility, the 5G. I think that is an area Huawei can, in a very concrete manner, improve the quality of life of the majority of the ASEAN people by making sure the coverage is wide and the speed. I think no point talking about there's coverage, but the speed is not there. It's so frustrating and you give up. Now in China, I went to many villages. The speed is so good. They're making using the internet a very happy, experience. But in ASEAN, it's very frustrating, even for myself. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Actually, our moderator here has done a lot of research in this area. And maybe, Andrew, I think you would like to add something.
Yes, briefly. So, yeah, I mean, I think Dr. Tan does target on a very important issue. Look, I mean, we know that in these times, there are so many calls on governments around the world, but, we encourage at Huawei, when we have these discussions with government stakeholders, industry stakeholders, it's quite clear, as I mentioned when I opened the panel discussion, we do seem to be at one of these rare hinge moments in history, and the potential of the digital economy, new technologies like 5G, the Internet of Things, AI, they may seem very futuristic and technologies really for the OECD countries, the advanced economies, but they could be as important as electrification in terms of their overall economic impacts. We know the digital economy is driving ahead and growing much more rapidly than the traditional economy. And globally, connectivity, the transfer of information knowledge is becoming more important than ever. And then the pandemic came along and showed the real crucial nature of ICT infrastructure. So yes, at the very foundation of digital economic development comes infrastructure. Without the infrastructure, you simply don't get the diffusion of capability, you don't build that digital awareness, you don't get all those small companies that are undergoing digitalization, then digital transformation, and essentially, growing prosperity for countries. So a really crucial issue. And of course, at Huawei, we've probably done more than most to make that connectivity, to make ICT infrastructure as cost effective as possible. And there's lots of ways and examples around the world about public-private partnership, other initiatives that can, really improve the kind of fiscal multiplier, the action of governments to make the investment now to gain all those returns in the future. But look, I'll leave it there. I think another important, we didn't get time during the panel discussion, but it'd be really interesting, I think, to hear from Professor Jose as well. Perhaps he could give some examples about, what is impeding small businesses within the region as well through digital transformation.
Wait, I think Raymond's question is for Professor Jose. Okay. Raymond, can you ask your question, please?
Hi. Yes.
Raymond
Thank
from
you.
Mayala Business Insight.
Yeah, Malaya Business Insight from the Philippines. Thank you. Thank you very much, gentlemen. I had some other questions, but they were already answered previously. So the question here is, SMEs, Dr. Jose said that 99% of SMEs in the Philippines, businesses in the Philippines are SMEs, and the pandemic was sort of a major shift, and digital transformation is important. But what are the usual stumbling blocks, Prof, in digitalization, and how do you think, say, Huawei or technology can help SMEs overcome these challenges?
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you want me
Thank
to
you.
answer that? Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Raymond, and thanks to Andrew. I think that's a very important question. Key stumbling blocks. Just to share with you, I put up a business at the beginning of the pandemic, and also involved in a couple of other startups, and very basic things too. For example, let's say if we're talking about the Philippines, only 29% of people have access to a bank account. And that's a big challenge, especially if you're talking about doing transactions online, whether as a seller, and more particularly if you're a seller. So, and just to get that, that's actually a challenge, because you would need certain identification requirements from that you need, and some people don't even have this identification. So just to have access to bank accounts, that's one. Another challenge is just the speed to, let's say, to start a business. It was already, even though, let's say, some government agencies, they're quite fast, everything is done online. But there are some, for example, let's say, with other registration, for example, for the Bureau of Internal Revenue or the Securities and Exchange Commission, it took us months to actually just to get everything done, all the requirements done, because things still had to be done on paper, and we had to submit stuff in person. And obviously that becomes a challenge when you have quarantine regulations, and physical movement is severely, and I'm already living in the main business district. What more if you're in the rural areas, where obviously coverage is much less. And as mentioned earlier, it's not, obviously technology can play a big role. If we have that coverage, then it will really help, okay? But also the mechanisms to make sure that we make the most use out of the coverage. The other challenge, obviously, in the Philippines is not only, we have around 73 million out of our 108 million population, which are already accessing the internet, which is good, but we can be better. Obviously, there's still that substantial percentage of people who need access to the internet. But then there's also the question of speed. The Philippines, for example, is one of the slowest speeds in the region. We're like less than half, or half compared to the global average in terms of speed of our internet. So there is also that particular aspect. So it's both the infrastructure side where Huawei can play a big role, but there's also that part in terms of how we manage our in terms of, let's say, the business, the ease of doing business too. And I know there's an e-commerce roadmap which is led by the government, and it's quite promising in terms of what it set out to do. And I think if we're able to implement that, then that can definitely help in terms of making sure that we have access. And obviously, it was also mentioned earlier in terms of education. And on the business side, our micro, small, medium enterprises also need access in terms of being able to know, let's say, simple stuff such as digital marketing, and having the skills to actually know what's available and what are the opportunities when it comes to exploring the digital side of the business, both in terms of managing their operations, but also on the markets that they can access. That's really a key part. And also in terms of security, which was mentioned earlier, is very important. And security, and also being able to manage fraud, cybercrime. Let's say in the Philippines, we have around 50% that are of the ones that are reported, which are addressed. And that's still a number that we can improve on. And being able to improve that will only increase, let's say, the trust and the confidence of, let's say, both the sellers and the buyers in these new platforms. So I hope I answered your question, Raymond.
Right. Well, thank you, Jose. And I just want to clear up one thing. Risa, your hand is still up. Did you want to ask a follow-up question, or is just you didn't unraise your hand? Okay, no answer. So we'll move to Philippines again. Art Samaniego from Manila Bulletin. You need to, oh yes. You can talk. Art Samaniego. Art, are you there? You just unmuted yourself. I guess not. Jose, while you're there, wanted to, I used to have a background as a journalist like many of these people there, and I'm still able to ask questions once in a while like a reporter. So we see a lot of new technologies like digital money, like paying with your smartphone and all that, which replaces things like, can replace things like credit cards, or online stores. They can replace supermarkets. In the move towards digitalization, do you see sometimes the losers trying to prevent progress, the potential losers, or like the entrenched interest, they're afraid to be of the new types of competitions?
Yeah, I think that's a very fair point. Obviously, whether these are small players or the large corporations, especially the ones who are entrenched in the industry, there is definitely some resistance in terms of, let's say, even themselves innovating and changing. Right? We call it innovation theater sometimes, that a company would say, hey, I'm doing this, I'm digitalizing my whole, let's say, financial institution, but if you look at their back end, it's all still very manual, and they're just waiting basically to be disrupted. So we see some players, I won't name them. And hopefully they can be clients soon, in terms of really pursuing innovation as a way to not only survive in this, but thrive, and to think of the long term as well. Because if you ask me, what we're experiencing now, these technologies, and especially with the rate of how technologies are evolving, what used to take several years to happen, now you're just thinking about the technology, it's already there. So part of the work that we do, for example, is we look at we scan the horizon and use futures tools to actually look at what's next in terms of the technologies that out there. And definitely there'll be both winners and losers, and for me, the winners would really be the ones who are able to see what are these, to be able to see these signals, and from there identify what can potentially happen, and not only what's the most possible future. For example, connectivity 24/7, that's already something that's a requirement, and that's definitely a possibility in terms of what can happen. But also looking at even preposterous scenarios, other scenarios that can have a potential impact. Like if you look at this pandemic, some people would say that it caught them by surprise, but futurists and even other institutions, and maybe some of our colleagues here, would actually say, no, this is something that we saw. And following our experiences coming from the past epidemics, it was just a matter of time that we have something like this. So I think the other challenge for organizations is not only resisting the present, but also being able to think more long term in terms of what's next. Because obviously, digital transformation, if you ask me, this is a given. It's something that we have to do. Those governments and those organizations who are able to really drive this and have conversations with different stakeholders to make it successful in their own context is already there. But then there's also that challenge of identifying to make sure that we account for unintended consequences, or future and looking at how these technologies will evolve, and making sure that we still keep human dignity, we still keep ourselves relevant as humans, and we make sure that it's something that's good and inclusive, and not just something that increases the digital divide.
Thank you for this answer. I have the question from Art. I hadn't noticed that it was text instead. So maybe for Mr. Le, I think you had warned us there were some questions you couldn't answer, but maybe this one will be okay. While the pandemic accelerated digital transformation and we have accepted technology as part of our daily lives, cybersecurity attacks also increased exponentially to business and ordinary internet users. What measures do we need to take to avoid privacy and security issues that could arise as we deepen regional integration? Do you think this, you can take this one, Mr. Long?
Okay, let me try. Yes, as I mentioned in my panelist discussion, and I just want to supplement some further information of what ASEAN as a region is now doing to address the cybersecurity issues. So we appreciate the questions, and then basically that in order to address the matter of privacy, I just may see that each ASEAN member country have a different standard and regulation on how to address the privacy issues. So basically that it's up to the government to impose any further restriction. But at the ASEAN level, we believe that ASEAN can do together. We set up the so-called the framework for the ASEAN personal privacy protection. So that's actually, it provides a good standard for the ASEAN member country to collectively address the privacy matter, so that each member country can make it reference to that and impose the appropriate restriction. The second thing that I think is very, very important, that ASEAN is now introduced the so-called the data management framework that will be adopted. That will be adopted by the private company, and that framework is the way to nurture and to cultivate the culture of how to strengthen the cybersecurity at the private sector level. So it also helped the ASEAN, or it also helped to address the cybersecurity at the very low level and at the fundamental level, actually, at the ground. So, and we hope that this kind of framework will strengthen the ASEAN capability to address the cybersecurity as a region. The final thing, but I think it's also the most fundamental overarching framework that ASEAN is now implementing, is the framework for the data, for the digital data governance. It also provides a series of principles that the member country should associate with in order to ensure that the data flow in ASEAN should be secure, should be integrated, should be in integrity, and that is how ASEAN is now doing from different level or different layer of engagement, from the private sector up to the government level, and also at the regional coordination level. So I hope that I can share some of the opinion on some of my perspective on this matter for your information. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. We should keep on schedule. All our panelists are busy, and the reporters always running from event to event. Very interesting discussion today, right, Andrew?
Very, yes.
So thank you very much to our panelists, and we hope to see you all next time at our at another event or in person, hopefully. So have a good rest of the afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much.